The conference room had that heavy, early morning tension, the kind where even the hum of the air vents felt too loud. Everyone had gathered because the new chief executive was in the building. Word had travelled fast. A man known for his no-nonsense style, the kind who could make or break a career with a single decision. He walked in without a smile, carrying a leather folder under his arm, and laid a single sheet on the glass table. It wasn't a contract, it wasn't a memo, it was a blueprint. And not just any blueprint, it was stunning. Clean lines, bold curves, light and shadow working together like a piece of art. The kind of design that makes you stop breathing for a second because it feels alive. He studied the faces around the table. "This," he said, tapping the page, "is the most impressive design I've seen here in years. But there's no name on it, so I'll ask once, who made it?" Silence. No one moved. Some glanced down at their notes, others shifted in their seats like the question was too heavy to hold. "I'm not looking for guesses," he continued, voice steady but sharp. "I want the real architect, and I want them now." Still nothing. And then, from the back of the room, came the quiet squeak of a cleaning cart's wheels. Every head turned. Standing there was a woman in a navy work uniform, rubber gloves still on, a dusting cloth in her pocket. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't shrinking away either. She just looked steady. She stepped forward, voice calm but clear. "I did it." The room went still. Someone actually laughed under their breath, thinking it was a joke, but she didn't waver. "My name is Clara Harris," she said, meeting the chief executive's eyes, "and that design is mine." You could feel the shift in the air, that thin line between disbelief and curiosity. No one knew what was about to happen, but for the first time that morning, every single person in that room was paying attention. For a moment, no one seemed to breathe. The chief executive didn't move, didn't even blink. He just stared at Clara like he was trying to decide if she was bold or out of her mind. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that you designed this?" "Yes," she replied, her tone steady as if she'd been waiting years to say it out loud. "Every line, every detail." A director at the far end of the table let out a quiet scoff. "Come on, maybe you traced it from something online." His words hung in the air like the smell of burnt coffee. Clara's eyes didn't flinch. "No, I sketched it by hand after hours. I used old paper I found in the supply closet. I scanned it myself, printed it without a name, and left it here to see if anyone would look at the work, without judging the person behind it." A ripple of discomfort passed around the table. The HR manager, Linda Chang, folded her arms. "With all due respect, Clara, you're a night cleaner. You don't have the credentials for this kind of work." "I do," Clara answered. "You just never asked." Ethan, the chief executive, looked around the room. "None of you knew about this?" A younger employee hesitated, then spoke up. "I've seen her on the design floor at night, sometimes sketching on the whiteboards. I thought it was just doodles." Ethan turned back to Clara. "What's your background?" She slowly pulled off one glove and placed it on the cart. "I have a degree in architecture from MIT. I ran my own firm once." The silence that followed was heavier than before. One manager shifted uncomfortably. Another took a sip of water but didn't swallow right away. Ethan tapped the blueprint once more, then stepped aside and gestured to the chair at the centre of the table. "Have a seat, Clara. I want to hear your story from the beginning." Clara walked forward, her footsteps soft against the carpet, but each one felt like it echoed. She sat down, not with hesitation, but with the quiet composure of someone finally stepping into a place she'd been told wasn't hers. No one looked at their phones now. Even the receptionist outside the glass wall had stopped typing. Ethan leaned in, his voice lower now. "Tell me, how does someone with your background end up pushing a mop in this building?" Clara took a slow breath. The answer she knew wasn't a short one, and it wasn't without pain. Clara didn't rush her words. She looked at the blueprint for a moment before speaking, almost as if drawing strength from it. "I used to live for this," she said softly. "Designing, building, bringing something into the world that would outlast me. Fresh out of college, I landed projects I'd dreamed about for years, my own firm, a small team that believed in me. I thought I had everything lined up, a career I loved and a family I adored." Her eyes shifted, not away in shame, but toward a memory she was careful with. "Then my daughter Emily got sick, one of those rare illnesses you don't see coming until it's too late. She was 7. The room was still, even Linda's folded arms loosened just a little. I tried to keep my business running while she was in and out of the hospital, but eventually I had to let it go. The clients stopped calling, the bills didn't, and then, one night she was gone. She let the words breathe for a moment, her voice steady but weighted. After that, I couldn't go back to being who I was. The sound of construction sites made my chest tighten. Looking at blueprints felt like staring into a life I'd lost. I sold my equipment, closed my office, and disappeared from that world. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just sat back, listening like every word mattered. I moved here because I needed quiet, Clara continued. A night job cleaning offices meant no small talk, no explanations, and enough money to keep a roof over my head. It gave me space to survive. And most nights, once everyone had gone home, I'd walk past the design floor. Sometimes I'd stop. I'd pick up a pencil. And for a little while, it felt like breathing again. Her hands rested on the table now, fingers relaxed. When I saw this company struggling with a certain project, I studied the rejected designs in the recycling bin. I thought, what if I reimagined it? Not for money, not for recognition, just to see if the idea itself could stand on its own. A faint hum from the lights above filled the pause. I left it on your desk, no name, no logo, because I wanted to know, would it be judged for its quality or dismissed because it came from someone no one notices? Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, not in doubt but in thought. The weight in the room had shifted. This was no longer about a surprise blueprint. It was about a question that was harder to answer than anyone wanted to admit, and for the first time since she'd started speaking, Clara allowed herself the smallest, almost unnoticeable smile. Ethan leaned back in his chair, still studying Clara like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. Then he stood, resting his hand on the blueprint in front of him. "Here's what we're going to do," he said, his voice steady, but carrying the kind of authority that made people sit up straighter. "Everyone in this room is going to design a concept for the Westbrook Community Arts and Learning Centre. You'll have 1 hour, no teams, no software, no assistants, just you, a pencil and paper." A couple of directors exchanged looks. One muttered under his breath, "This is ridiculous." Another tapped his pen nervously on the table. Ethan ignored them. "The goal is simple. Merge sustainability, public accessibility, and originality inside a tight urban footprint. When time's up, you'll pin your work on the board. And yes, Clara will be participating." The room reacted instantly, a mix of disbelief and irritation. Linda Chang spoke up from her end of the table. "She's not even on the design staff." "Then this should be easy for you," Ethan replied without looking at her. "If she's as unqualified as you think, you'll have no trouble outshining her." He nodded toward the far wall where a stack of blank sketch pads and sharpened pencils waited. "Clock starts now." The room moved in reluctant unison. Some grabbed rulers, flipping open reference books they'd stashed in their bags. Others began drawing quick outlines, erasing, starting over, erasing again. Clara took a seat at the corner of the table. She opened the pad, placed her pencil on the page, and just sat there for a few seconds with her eyes closed. It wasn't hesitation. It was as if she was listening for something only she could hear. Then she began to draw, smooth, deliberate lines that flowed without pause. She didn't measure every mark, she already knew where they belonged. While others filled their pages with boxes and technical angles, Clara's design grew organically, like she was uncovering something that had been waiting all along. A few people wandered behind her under the guise of stretching their legs, trying to sneak a look. They saw curves, open spaces, light wells, and a central feature they couldn't quite decipher. And it unsettled them more than they wanted to admit. When Ethan called, "Time's up," pencils dropped, papers shuffled, the room smelled faintly of graphite and tension. "Clara," he said, gesturing toward the board, "you're first." She picked up her sketch pad, walked to the front, and pinned the page without ceremony. "It's a place for everyone," she said simply, stepping back so they could see. "A building that feels open before you even walk inside." The room leaned in, drawn by something they didn't fully understand yet. And just like that, every eye was locked on her design. Clara stood by the board, one hand resting lightly on the corner of her sketch. She didn't rush to explain. She let the room look, let them take in the broad, open courtyard, the sweeping glass facade, and the way sunlight seemed to pour through the central atrium she'd drawn. "This," she began, her voice calm but carrying just enough weight to hold every ear, "isn't just a building. It's a place where people feel welcome before they even step inside. I designed the entrance to be wide, open, with no heavy doors to push, so a parent with a stroller or someone using a wheelchair can glide right in without feeling like they need help." Her pencil traced over the curved lines of the atrium. "This is the heart of the space, a tower of light. It's meant to feel alive, to catch the sunrise and the sunset, to change through the day. It's inspired by something my daughter once said." The room grew quieter, as if the air itself had slowed. "She told me," Clara continued, "that she wanted to live in something I designed. She was 7 at the time. She loved to draw flowers, especially ones that grew tall enough to touch the sky. This atrium is my version of her flower, a place where light blooms." She paused, her eyes fixed on the page, steady but soft. "Emily didn't get to see it, but I wanted to build it for her anyway, and for anyone who's ever needed a place that feels like hope." No one spoke. Even the usual shuffling of papers had stopped. A younger architect near the back swallowed hard and looked down at his own sketch. Linda broke the silence. "It's a nice sentiment," she said, her tone just sharp enough to cut. "But sentiment doesn't mean it's structurally sound. A pretty drawing isn't the same as a practical design." Clara didn't flinch. Before she could respond, Ethan spoke up. "Linda, I've been looking at half-baked concepts for weeks. This is the first one that's original, visionary, and rooted in something real. And I'd bet she knows exactly how to make it work." Linda leaned back in her chair, lips pressed tight. Ethan turned back to Clara. "I've seen enough. You're not staying on the night crew. As of now, you're leading the Westbrook project." Gasps rippled through the room. Clara just stood there, her hand still on the sketch, as if grounding herself in the moment. Then she spoke, her voice even but firm. "I'll do it, on one condition." Ethan's brow lifted. "What's that?" She met his eyes. "I want to choose my own team." She wasn't just accepting a project. She was setting the terms for how it would be built, and who would be trusted to build it alongside her. Ethan didn't answer right away. He studied Clara for a long moment, as if weighing whether she was making a bold move or walking into trouble. "Your own team?" he repeated. "Yes," she said. "I don't want the usual names from the company roster. I want people with talent who've been overlooked. People like me." A low murmur moved through the room. One of the senior architects leaned toward another and whispered, "She's already trying to run the place." Linda spoke up, her voice dripping with skepticism. "So you're saying you want to fill a multi-million-dollar project with what, amateurs?" "No," Clara said, calm but unshakable. "I'm saying I want to fill it with people who understand what it's like to build from the ground up. People who've had to fight for every inch they've gotten. That perspective changes the way you design. It makes you think about who will actually use the building, not just how it looks on a glossy portfolio." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You have anyone in mind?" She nodded. "A single mother in Queens who's been designing public playgrounds by hand for her neighbourhood. A Haitian immigrant in Brooklyn who has an architecture degree but is hauling cement on job sites because no one will interview him. A high school senior in the Bronx who rebuilt an entire community garden from scratch with no budget." The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the lights overhead. Linda let out a sharp laugh. "You really think this is how we do business here?" Ethan turned his gaze to her, his voice low but cutting. "Maybe that's the problem." He looked back at Clara. "You'll get your team, but if they can't deliver, if they fall short, the blame falls on you. You sure you want to take that risk?" Clara didn't hesitate. "I've lived with bigger risks." There was something in her tone, not arrogance, not defiance, just certainty. And for the first time since she'd walked into that room with a cleaning cart, it felt like the balance of power had shifted. Ethan stood. "All right, let's build it your way." 2 days later, Clara walked into the office without her uniform for the first time. No mop, no gloves, no cart, just a black notebook tucked under her arm and a quiet determination in her step. Ethan had cleared a small glass-walled room for her, the kind usually reserved for private client meetings. It wasn't big, but to Clara it felt like a new starting line. She opened her notebook and began making calls, not to recruiters or headhunters. They wouldn't understand what she was looking for. She started with a woman named Carla Vega, a single mum in Queens she'd read about in a neighbourhood paper. Carla had been sketching public playgrounds for years, raising money through bake sales and block parties, then building them with donated materials. "I can't pay you what you deserve yet," Clara told her, "but I can promise you a seat at the table." Carla didn't hesitate. "Tell me where to be." Next was Jean-Baptiste, a Haitian immigrant working construction in Brooklyn. On paper, he was a labourer. In reality, he held an accredited architecture degree and had designed schools back in Port-au-Prince before moving to the States. Clara found him on his lunch break, sitting on a stack of lumber, eating rice from a foil container. She showed him the Westbrook project outline. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked up. "I thought I'd never hold something like this again," he said quietly. Her last call that day was to 17-year-old Malik Johnson from the Bronx. She'd seen a local news clip about how he rebuilt his neighbourhood's abandoned community garden. No grant, no official support, just resourcefulness, grit, and the kind of vision you can't teach. When she explained the project, he laughed nervously. "You know I'm still in high school, right?" Clara smiled. "All that means is you haven't been told what's impossible yet." By the end of the week, the team was assembled. They didn't look like a polished corporate design crew. No matching suits, no expensive briefcases. Malik showed up with a backpack covered in pins. Carla wore work jeans with a folded measuring tape sticking out of the pocket. Jean-Baptiste brought his old drafting tools in a dented metal case. When they walked into Harrison & Cole for the first time together, heads turned. Some people smirked, others whispered, but Clara didn't slow down, and neither did they. Ethan was waiting in the conference room, arms crossed, a half smile on his face. "All right," he said, looking over the group. "Let's see what the rest of this building is made of." From day one, the new team stood out, and not in a way the old guard liked. In a firm where polished shoes and tailored blazers were the unofficial dress code, Malik's hoodie and sneakers drew side eyes. Carla's calloused hands and jeans with faint paint stains earned her more than a few raised eyebrows. Jean-Baptiste's heavy accent made some people talk to him slower, as if he couldn't possibly understand. Clara noticed every look, every whisper, but she didn't let it break her stride. "We're not here to blend in," she reminded them. "We're here to build something no one's seen before." They claimed a corner of the open design floor, a space most architects avoided because the lighting was uneven and the vents rattled when the heat kicked on. Within days, that corner transformed into a creative storm. Carla sketched playground-inspired courtyards where kids and adults could coexist without feeling like they were in separate worlds. Jean-Baptiste redrew the roofline to capture rainwater for the gardens Malik planned to design. Malik covered the wall in sticky notes filled with community ideas he'd gathered from talking to locals outside the office. It wasn't smooth sailing. A senior architect named Peter stopped by one afternoon, glancing at their work. "Looks nice," he said, the words dripping with condescension. "But this isn't how real projects get done." Clara stepped in before anyone could respond. "You're right," she said evenly. "Real projects don't usually start here, but the good ones can." The longer they worked, the more the building seemed to reveal itself. Late nights blurred into early mornings. They ate pizza over blueprints, argued over materials, laughed when Malik's model collapsed under the weight of too much cardboard. Every piece they added felt intentional, tied to the people who'd one day use the space. But not everyone was rooting for them. Linda hovered at the edges, quietly collecting notes, occasionally stopping to point out oversights in their plans. She had a habit of questioning them in front of others, subtle digs disguised as concern. Clara recognised it for what it was, a setup. One evening, as the team packed up, Carla asked quietly, "She's trying to make us fail, isn't she?" Clara looked over at Linda's closed office door, then back at her team. "She's trying," Clara said. "That doesn't mean she will." They left the office that night with more determination than they'd started with. Because in a few days, they would have to present their work not just to Ethan, but to the entire firm. And Clara knew Linda was planning to be ready with her strike. The days that followed moved quickly, each one carrying them closer to the presentation that would decide the fate of everything they'd worked for. The day of the presentation arrived with the kind of electric tension you could almost feel in your teeth. Clara's team gathered early, spreading their models and sketches across the table while the rest of the firm trickled into the conference hall. Every senior architect was there, along with department heads and project leads. Even a few clients had been invited to observe. Ethan stood at the front, arms crossed, waiting for the noise to settle. "We've been working toward a vision for the Westbrook Community Arts and Learning Centre," he began. "Today, we'll see what this team has created." He gestured toward Clara. "You're up first." Clara walked to the board with her team following close behind. Carla laid out the courtyard sketches, open spaces filled with gardens, play areas, and quiet corners for reading. Jean-Baptiste rolled out his roof plans, explaining how rainwater would be captured and reused to maintain the gardens and keep utility costs low. Malik pinned up his wall of community input, showing photos and handwritten notes from residents who had shaped their design choices. "This building," Clara said, stepping forward, "isn't just for the people who can afford season passes to an art gallery, it's for everyone. It's a space that feels alive because it was built with the community's voice woven into its walls." The room was quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet, but the kind that meant people were actually listening. Then Linda's voice broke through. "It's a charming idea," she said, her smile thin. "But charming doesn't mean it's realistic. The budget is tight, and these features, gardens, water systems, open atriums, they're not exactly cost-friendly. A good sketch isn't the same as a sound structure." Clara turned to face her. "We've run the numbers. Every feature you see here has been costed out. The rainwater system pays for itself within 5 years. The gardens are low maintenance and use native plants to reduce upkeep. The open atrium cuts down on artificial lighting costs. It's not just sustainable, it's efficient." Linda's smile faltered, but she wasn't done. "Even so, this is a high-stakes project. Experience matters, and your unconventional team doesn't exactly have a track record." Ethan stepped forward then, his voice calm but carrying weight. "You're right about one thing, Linda. Experience matters. And it's my experience that tells me what I'm looking at right now is more original, more functional, and more human than anything else I've seen in years." He turned to the room. "This is the design we're moving forward with. Clara Harris will lead the project." The announcement landed like a gavel. Some people applauded. Others exchanged glances, unsure whether to be impressed or uneasy. Clara didn't smile in victory. She simply nodded, her hand brushing against the edge of Malik's community board. For her, the real work was just beginning. And in 2 weeks, when the groundbreaking ceremony came, she planned to make sure everyone understood exactly why this building mattered. The morning of the groundbreaking felt different from any day Clara had known in years. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes you up without coffee. A crowd had gathered at the empty lot where the Westbrook Community Arts and Learning Centre would soon rise. City officials in dark coats, neighbourhood families with kids tugging at their sleeves, local artists holding sketchbooks, even a few construction workers who'd come on their day off. Her team stood together near the stage. Malik fidgeted with the zipper on his hoodie. Carla kept brushing her hair out of her face, eyes scanning the crowd like she couldn't believe this many people had shown up. Jean-Baptiste wore his one good jacket, the drafting tools he carried everywhere tucked neatly into the inside pocket. When Ethan stepped to the microphone, the crowd quieted. "This project started as a set of anonymous lines on a page," he said, "but it became something bigger, a reminder that talent doesn't always sit in the corner office. Sometimes it's right in front of you if you're willing to see it." He turned toward her. "Please welcome our lead architect, Clara Harris." The applause was real, warm, not the polite kind. Clara walked up slowly, the gravel crunching under her shoes. She looked out at the faces, strangers, co-workers, neighbours, and took a breath. "For years," she began, "I walked through buildings I dreamed of designing, pushing a mop, emptying trash cans, making sure the lights were off when everyone went home. I didn't mind the work. But the hardest part wasn't cleaning floors. It was being invisible. Knowing I still had something to give, and no one saw it. She glanced toward the front row where a little girl sat on her mother's lap, sketching in a notebook. For a second, Clara's throat tightened. My daughter Emily believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She once told me she wanted to live in something I designed. She didn't get that chance, but this building is for her, and for everyone who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told they didn't belong here. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes shone. This centre will be a place where people don't have to fight to be seen, where a kid from the Bronx, or a mother in Queens, or an immigrant hauling cement can walk in and feel like they matter, because they do. She stepped away from the mic, walked to the ceremonial shovel, and pressed it into the dirt. The first scoop was small, but the cheer that rose from the crowd felt like it shook the street. Before heading back to her team, she pulled a small brass plaque from her bag. The words were simple, etched in clean letters. For Emily, you live here now. She handed it to the site manager, who promised to place it in the building's foundation. As the crowd began to mingle, Clara didn't head for the VIP tent. She stayed with her team, their hands smudged with dirt from passing the shovel back and forth. Around them, the future was just beginning to take shape. And for the first time in a long time, Clara felt not just seen, but exactly where she was meant to be. Lesson: never judge someone's worth by their job title or uniform. Talent can be hidden in plain sight, and when given a chance, it can change everything, for the person, for the team, and for the world. Thank you for staying with me until the very last moment of this story. I'm truly grateful for it. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again on Rain Inside.